A young nurse donated her kidney unaware. Her patient was a lonely millionaire CEO. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Anna Monroe had always been the type of person who lived with her heart on her sleeve. A young nurse at Westbridge Private Hospital, she had a quiet but intense passion for her job. It wasn't just about the medical procedures, the endless hours of care, or the life-saving surgeries she'd witnessed. For Anna, it was the little moments, the connection with her patients, the smile when they woke up, the words of gratitude when they got better. But none of that prepared her for the patient she was about to meet. One rainy evening, as she walked through the hospital's sterile, brightly lit halls, she received an unexpected summons from Dr. Harris, the head of neurology. The urgency in his voice made Anna's stomach churn with nerves. She stepped into his office and immediately noticed the seriousness in his eyes. "Anna, we have a special case tonight. It's not for the faint-hearted," he began, his tone almost warning. Anna's brows furrowed as she waited for him to elaborate. "Grant Carter," he said, holding up a thick file, the cover bearing a tragic headline of a car accident that had left the youngest billionaire CEO in a coma for over a year. She'd heard of him. Everyone had. Grant Carter, the ruthless CEO of Carter Enterprises, the man whose name was synonymous with success, power, and wealth. Yet now, here he was a mere shell of the man he used to be, trapped in his own body, unable to move, speak, or respond. Dr. Harris continued, his voice softening. "We need someone who will care. Someone who will treat him like a person, not just a body in a hospital bed. His family has practically abandoned him, and most of the staff just go through the motions. I want you to care for him." Anna felt a pit form in her stomach. This wasn't just another case. This was different. This was a man who had once had everything: wealth, fame, power, and now he had nothing. But there was something in Dr. Harris's eyes, a plea, an unspoken trust. "I'll do it," Anna replied, the words leaving her lips before she could second-guess them. As Anna entered Grant's private suite, she was immediately struck by the cold, sterile luxury that surrounded her. The room was larger than her entire apartment, with plush carpeting and expensive furniture. But the man lying in the center of the room was a far cry from the person who had once lived in such opulence. Hooked up to machines, tubes running into his arms, he looked so fragile, so small. Anna felt a lump form in her throat. She had seen people in comas before, but this man, this billionaire, felt like he was a world away from everything she knew. She took a deep breath and started her work, adjusting his IV and wiping his forehead with a warm cloth. As she worked, she couldn't help but talk to him. Maybe it was just a way to fill the silence, but she needed to believe that he could hear her, that he could feel her presence. "I read somewhere that people in comas can still hear things," she murmured, almost to herself. "So Grant, if you can hear me, I promise I'm doing my best to take care of you." It became a routine for her. Every day, Anna would spend hours in his room, bathing him, changing his sheets, monitoring his vitals. And every day she'd talk to him, sharing stories about her life, her dreams, and sometimes her fears. She told him about her struggles, about her job as a nurse, about how she was trying to balance her work with caring for her aging parents. She even joked about the cafeteria food, telling him that it was so bad it could break even the strongest man's spirit. But what surprised her the most was how she began to care for him not just as a patient, but as a person. His stillness, his vulnerability, it called to something deep within her. Despite his state, despite everything he had lost, Anna found herself drawn to him. It wasn't love. It wasn't even pity. It was something simpler: compassion. But Anna had no idea that she was already beginning to heal him in ways she could never imagine. After weeks of routine care, one evening something incredible happened. While Anna was adjusting his pillow, she felt the faintest pressure on her wrist. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but then it happened again. She froze, staring down at his hand. Was it really moving? Could it be? "Grant?" she whispered, her voice shaking. For a moment there was nothing, no response, just the steady beep of the heart monitor. But then he squeezed her hand. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe it. After all these weeks, after all the small signs she had ignored, Grant Carter had just moved. She jumped up, rushing to call the doctors, her voice trembling with excitement and disbelief. In that moment, Anna realized that this wasn't just a job anymore, it was something much bigger. She wasn't just taking care of a comatose patient, she was becoming part of his story, his journey back to life. And little did she know, her own life was about to change forever. As she stepped back to let the doctors take over, Anna felt a strange mix of hope and fear. What would happen next? Would Grant wake up? And if he did, would he remember her? The journey she had started as just another nurse in a hospital room was about to take her somewhere she could never have anticipated. Stay tuned, because this story is just beginning as the days passed. Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. It wasn't just the small signs of recovery from Grant, though that too was remarkable. It was the way she began to feel about him. She had always seen herself as a professional, someone who could detach her emotions from her work. But with Grant, it was different. She found herself spending more and more time with him, even when it wasn't necessary, talking to him, sharing small moments, telling him about her day. She had never done this with other patients. She had never felt this connection. Despite knowing that he couldn't hear her, she still spoke, hoping, wishing that maybe he would feel her presence, maybe he would somehow understand. It became a routine for her, care for him, speak to him, and wait for any signs that he was truly coming back. And yet, there was a growing uncertainty inside her. How long would it take? Could he truly come back from this state? Her mind kept circling back to one question. What happens if he wakes up and remembers nothing? What if he doesn't recognize me at all? But then, just as Anna had begun to doubt herself, something changed. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but there was a shift, a small, almost imperceptible movement. One evening, as she was adjusting his IV line, she saw his fingers twitch. Not the involuntary twitch that sometimes happens with a comatose patient, but something more intentional. She stopped what she was doing and stared, her breath catching in her throat. She held her breath, waiting for any other movement, but there was nothing. Anna gently brushed her fingers over his hand, hoping to encourage more movement. Was it real? She wondered. Had she imagined it? She leaned over, whispering softly, "Grant, if you can hear me, just squeeze my hand once." The seconds stretched on, and just when Anna thought she might be imagining things, she felt it a faint squeeze. Her heart skipped a beat. He had responded, not with words, but with a single, deliberate movement. Her breath caught in her chest as she realized what this meant. He was waking up. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Anna reported the small movement to Dr. Harris, who quickly arranged for a full examination. The tests came back inconclusive, but there was no denying it. Grant had made progress. His fingers would twitch occasionally, his eyes fluttered, and for brief moments he seemed to be aware of his surroundings. It wasn't much, but it was something real. Over the next few weeks, Anna kept up with her routine, now even more determined to help Grant recover. She continued to talk to him, telling him stories of the world outside, hoping that, somehow, the sounds of her voice would reach him. She kept things light, always trying to keep the mood positive, but there were times when she couldn't help but feel a deep sadness. How could someone so powerful, so successful, end up in this state? How could he be reduced to someone who couldn't even recognize his own reflection? But then one day, as Anna was sitting by his side, reading from a book she had brought from home, something unexpected happened. Grant's eyelids fluttered, and slowly, almost painfully, he opened his eyes. His gaze shifted, scanning the room, and then landed on her. It was as if time itself had slowed down. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't breathe. It was real. Grant was awake. For a long moment they simply stared at each other. Anna couldn't speak. She was frozen in place. And then, after what felt like an eternity, Grant finally whispered, "Where am I?" The sound of his voice sent a shiver down Anna's spine. It was deep and hoarse, but it was his voice. The voice of the man she had been caring for, the man she had spoken to for weeks while he lay unconscious. She blinked, struggling to find the words to respond. "You're in the hospital," she said, her voice shaking. "You've been in a coma for a while, but you're awake now. You're going to be okay." Grant blinked again, his gaze softening as if he were trying to process everything. He tried to move his hand, but his muscles were stiff. Anna quickly adjusted his pillow, making sure he was comfortable. She sat down beside him, keeping her voice calm and steady. "You've been through a lot," she continued, "but you're safe now. You're going to get better." Grant looked at her, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to remember something, anything. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hit Anna like a wave. Of course he didn't remember her. Why would he? He had been unconscious for so long. She swallowed the lump in her throat and smiled softly. "I'm Anna," she said. "I've been taking care of you." For a long time, there was silence between them. Anna could feel the weight of the moment. She wasn't sure how to respond, how to bridge the gap between who Grant had been and who he was now. He was still the same person, yet he was so different. There was a sadness in his eyes, a kind of vulnerability that hadn't been there before. The powerful CEO was gone, replaced by someone who seemed lost and fragile. But in that moment, Anna knew something that she hadn't before. She wanted to help him heal. She didn't know how, but she knew she couldn't walk away now. And that was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. A chapter that would bring them closer together, but also force them to confront the painful truth of what had happened to Grant and what had been left behind. The days that followed Grant's awakening were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. Anna remained by his side, more dedicated than ever to his recovery, though the road ahead was uncertain. She had hoped that his memory would return quickly, that he would remember his life before the accident, the empire he had built, and the people he had known. But that was not the case. Each day brought small signs of progress. He could sit up for a few minutes at a time, his hand could grip hers with more strength, and his voice became clearer when he spoke. But his memories remained elusive. He still didn't remember much of his past, and Anna began to wonder if he ever would. The man who had once controlled vast businesses, made life-changing decisions with a glance, was now relying on her for everything. And although he was trying to piece together the fragments of his past, it was clear that he was struggling. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Anna was sitting beside him in his private room, her hand gently resting on his. She had been reading to him, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy in the midst of this chaotic journey, when Grant finally spoke again. His voice was still quiet, but there was a determination in it that hadn't been there before. "Anna," he said, his eyes meeting hers for the first time that evening, "I don't remember much, but I remember you." Anna's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had never expected him to say something like that. The man who had been so distant, so withdrawn, was now acknowledging her presence in a way that felt real, almost intimate. "I remember you," he repeated, his voice soft but steady. "I remember you caring for me, talking to me like I wasn't just some patient in a bed, but a person." Tears welled up in Anna's eyes as she looked at him. She hadn't expected any acknowledgement like that, and she wasn't sure how to respond. All this time, she had been there for him, doing everything she could to help him heal, but never once did she imagine that he might truly notice the effort. "I've been here for you, Grant," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "because I believe you can get better. I believe you can come back from this, no matter how long it takes." Grant didn't say anything for a moment, and Anna could see the conflict in his eyes. He was trying to process everything, trying to understand what had happened to him and what kind of man he had been before the accident. He had been successful, powerful, and perhaps a little cold, but now he was struggling with the reality of being completely dependent on someone else. It was a humbling experience for him, one that he hadn't been prepared for. As the days passed, Anna could see that Grant was beginning to change. His physical recovery was still slow, but his emotional state was shifting. He began asking more questions about his life before the accident, about his company and his family. Anna shared what little she knew, but she avoided telling him about the full extent of his isolation from his family, how they had practically abandoned him after the accident. She didn't want to burden him with that kind of pain just yet. It wasn't until a week later, during one of their afternoon sessions, that Grant finally asked the question that had been haunting him. "What happened to my family?" he asked, his voice quiet but full of hurt. Anna hesitated before answering, unsure of how much to tell him. "They haven't been around much," she said, trying to soften the truth. "Your business partners and some friends have checked in, but your family hasn't been here." She could see the pain in his eyes as he processed the words, but he didn't ask more questions after that. Instead, he simply looked out the window, his mind clearly working through everything he had just learned. Anna was there for him in those moments, even when the silence between them felt heavy. She never tried to fill the void with empty words or false reassurances. She understood that sometimes the most important thing she could do was simply be there, offering comfort through her presence. The connection between them grew stronger as the days went on, and Anna began to feel a shift in her own heart. She had started this journey as his caregiver, someone simply doing her job. But now, she couldn't deny that her feelings for him were changing. It was impossible to ignore the bond that had formed between them, the way they had shared so many quiet moments together, the way he had come to rely on her in ways no one else had ever done before. She wasn't sure where this was heading, but for the first time since the accident, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they had both found something they had been missing in their lives. A sense of purpose, a sense of connection. And perhaps, most importantly, a sense of hope. As the weeks passed, Anna continued her routine of caring for Grant, but the emotional weight of the situation began to feel heavier. Grant was waking up more and more each day, his physical recovery steadily improving, but the emotional scars were harder to heal. He still struggled with the loss of his memories, and despite his growing awareness, the loneliness he felt seemed to linger just beneath the surface. Anna could see it in his eyes. Even when he tried to remain composed, there was a sadness there that he couldn't shake off. One afternoon, as she was sitting by his bedside, Grant asked her a question that stopped her cold. "Do you think I'll ever be the same again?" His voice was steady, but the vulnerability in his words was undeniable. Anna hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She had always been honest with him, but this felt different. She had no idea how to answer, how to tell him that the man he had been strong, invincible, untouchable, might never return. Instead, she chose her words carefully. "I think you'll get through this," she said softly. "Maybe you won't be the same, but you'll find a new way to live, a new way to be." She hoped her words would give him some comfort, but she wasn't sure if they would. Grant was quiet for a long time after that, his gaze fixed on the wall, as if lost in thought. Anna sat there, silently watching him, unsure of what more she could do. She had always been the one to offer encouragement and hope, but now she was struggling to find the right words herself. For the first time since meeting him, she felt the weight of their situation, the weight of what he had lost, and what he might never regain. In the weeks that followed, Grant began to open up more to Anna, asking her questions about his past, about the people in his life before the accident. He seemed eager to fill in the blanks, but every time he learned something new, it only seemed to confuse him more. The more he learned about his wealth and success, the more disconnected he seemed to feel from it all. He had built an empire, but now, sitting in a hospital bed, it felt like all of that success had been meaningless. One evening, as Anna was helping him with his physical therapy exercises, Grant spoke again. This time, there was a quiet resolve in his voice. "I don't want to be that man anymore," he said. Anna paused, looking up at him, unsure of what he meant. "I don't want to go back to the person I was before," he continued, his voice heavy with emotion. "The man who only cared about money and power, who didn't care about the people around him. I don't want to live like that anymore." Anna felt a lump form in her throat. This wasn't the Grant she had known before the accident, the man who had been so driven, so focused on his empire. This was a man who was searching for something deeper, something that couldn't be bought. "You don't have to be that man anymore," she said quietly. "You can be whoever you want to be. You have a second chance, Grant. Don't waste it." The words hung in the air between them, a promise, a challenge. Grant looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and something else, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Hope. He nodded slowly, as if her words had given him a sense of direction, something to hold on to as he navigated this new life he had been thrust into. Over the next few days, Anna saw a change in him. It wasn't dramatic, but it was there. He began to show more interest in the world outside the hospital, asking her about the city, about the people he used to know. He started taking more of an active role in his physical therapy, pushing himself harder, not just for his recovery, but because he wanted to prove to himself that he could do it. He wanted to be more than just a man who had lost everything. He wanted to rebuild, to find purpose again. Anna, too, began to feel something stir inside her. She had always been focused on Grant's recovery, on making sure he had everything he needed. But now, as she watched him struggle and push himself, she realized that she had been holding back her own feelings. Over time, she found herself drawn to him in a way she hadn't expected. She hadn't planned for this. She hadn't expected to develop feelings for him, but now, it was hard to ignore the connection between them. The bond they had formed through this difficult journey was growing stronger with each passing day, And Anna couldn't deny that she was starting to care for him in a way that went beyond her role as his nurse. It wasn't just the way he was recovering. The way he was changing it was something deeper, something she hadn't anticipated. Anna wasn't sure if Grant felt the same way, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a patient-caregiver relationship. They had been through so much together, and in a way, they had both healed each other. But as Anna spent more time with him, the more she began to wonder, was this connection something that could last, or was it just a product of their shared experience? As the weeks continued to pass, Grant's recovery progressed at a steady pace, and with each new improvement, Anna found herself feeling more deeply connected to him. What had started as a simple job, an obligation, was now turning into something much more personal. She had been there for him through his darkest days, when he couldn't remember who he was, when he couldn't move, when the weight of his loss seemed insurmountable. But now she saw glimpses of the man he had once been, the man who was determined, strong-willed, and not afraid to fight for what he wanted. And, as she spent more time with him, it became clear that he was fighting not just for his health but for his future. Grant had begun asking more questions about his past, about the decisions he had made, the people he had hurt, the things he had sacrificed. He wasn't just concerned with his physical recovery anymore. He was focused on the emotional and mental healing he needed to go through in order to rebuild his life. Every day, he would ask Anna about his business, about his family, about the life he had left behind. And each time, Anna would share what little she knew, always careful not to overwhelm him with the harsh truths about how he had been abandoned. She didn't want to burden him more than he already was, but she knew that, at some point, he would have to face the reality of his situation. One afternoon, as she was helping him with his physical therapy exercises, Grant turned to her and asked, "Do you think I'll ever be able to go back to my old life?" His voice was tinged with uncertainty, a question that had been on his mind for weeks. Anna paused for a moment before responding, choosing her words carefully. "I think you can have a new life," she said softly. "It might not be the same as before, but you can build something new. You've been given a second chance, Grant. You don't have to go back to who you were. You can be someone else, someone better, if that's what you want." Grant looked at her for a long time, his gaze thoughtful. He seemed to be processing her words, weighing them carefully, as if he were contemplating the possibility of a life that was different from the one he had known. He had always been so focused on power and success, but now he was beginning to understand that there was more to life than wealth and influence. As the days passed, Anna found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't expected. She had always been professional, keeping her emotions in check, but the more time she spent with him, the more she realized that there was something between them, something that went beyond her role as his nurse. She had seen him at his weakest, and now she was watching him fight to regain his strength. There was something undeniably attractive about that, about his determination, his vulnerability, and the way he trusted her, even though he didn't fully remember her life or the person he had been. One evening, as Anna sat beside him, watching him work through his physical therapy exercises, Grant turned to her with a look in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. "Anna," he said quietly, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for me. You've been there for me when no one else was. You've helped me more than anyone ever could. I don't think I would be here without you." His words caught her off guard, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had never expected to hear him say something like that. She had always been the one to give, to support, but now it felt like he was beginning to see her in a different light. "I'm just doing my job," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here because I care about you, Grant. I've seen you at your lowest, and I've watched you fight to get better. That's all the thanks I need." Grant smiled, and for the first time in weeks, Anna saw a genuine smile, a smile that reached his eyes. It was a small thing, but it meant more to her than she could express. As time went on, their relationship continued to evolve. Anna knew that she couldn't ignore the feelings she had for him any longer, but she wasn't sure if Grant felt the same way. She was still his nurse, after all, and their connection was born out of a difficult, vulnerable time. It was complicated, and Anna wasn't sure if it was something that could last beyond the hospital room. But what she did know was that she couldn't walk away from him. She had become too invested in his recovery, and in him as a person, to leave now. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session, Grant looked at Anna and said, "I don't know what's going to happen when I leave this hospital, but I know one thing. I don't want to do it without you." His words hit Anna like a wave, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She had been waiting for him to say something like this, but hearing it made everything feel so much more real. She had always known that she cared for him, but now it seemed like he was ready to admit that he cared for her too. "I don't want to do it without you either," she said softly, her heart racing. In that moment, Anna knew that things were about to change. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it with Grant by her side. They had both been through so much, and they had come out the other side stronger. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. As the days went by, Anna and Grant settled into a new rhythm. Grant's physical recovery was progressing well, and his mental state was becoming stronger with each passing day. He had started attending therapy sessions regularly, and although it was still a struggle, there was a determination in him that hadn't been there before. Anna continued to care for him, but now she was also becoming a confidant, someone he could turn to when the weight of his past became too much to bear. Despite the difficulties, there was an undeniable shift between them. What had started as a professional relationship was now something deeper, something neither of them could ignore. One evening, after another long therapy session, Grant surprised Anna with a question that had been on his mind for some time. "Anna," he began, his voice tentative, "how do you do it? How do you keep going every day, even when things get so hard?" Anna looked up from her notes, her gaze softening as she met his eyes. It wasn't a question she had expected, but it was one she had thought about herself. She had often wondered what kept her going through all the long hours, the constant responsibility, the emotional toll that caring for someone like Grant brought. "I think," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, "I keep going because I believe in people. I believe that even when things look hopeless, there's always a chance for change, a chance for recovery, a chance for a new beginning." Grant looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name. "You really believe that?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with awe. Anna nodded, a gentle smile tugging at her lips. "I do," she said softly. "I believe that everyone deserves a second chance, even when it seems like all hope is lost." For a long time, neither of them said anything. The silence between them wasn't awkward, though. It was peaceful, as if they both understood the gravity of what they had just shared. Grant's eyes never left hers, and Anna felt a sense of warmth spread through her chest. It was a simple conversation, but it felt significant. It felt like a turning point. Over the next few days, the connection between Anna and Grant deepened. They talked more openly about their pasts, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Grant began to open up more about his regrets, the people he had hurt, the choices he had made, the things he had sacrificed in the name of success. He was no longer the cold, unapproachable CEO he had once been. Now, he was a man trying to make sense of his new life, a man who was learning to forgive himself for the things he couldn't change. But as their emotional bond grew stronger, Anna couldn't help but feel a growing sense of uncertainty. She had always been the one to give, to care for others, but now she was starting to wonder if there was a place for her in Grant's new life. He was recovering, becoming stronger, and she was still his nurse, his caregiver. What would happen when he was well enough to leave the hospital? Would he go back to his old life, the one he had before the accident? And if he did, where would that leave her? One evening, after dinner, Anna found herself alone with Grant in his hospital room. It was late, and the hospital was quiet. The hum of the machines and the soft shuffle of nurses' footsteps the only sounds in the distance. Grant was sitting up in bed, looking out the window, his expression distant. Anna sat beside him, unsure of what to say. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Grant spoke. "Anna," he said, his voice low, "I don't know what the future holds for me, but I know one thing. I don't want to go back to who I was before. I don't want to be the man who put work and success before everything else. I want something different, something real." Anna's heart skipped a beat. She turned to face him, her breath catching in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant looked at her then, his eyes searching hers, as if looking for the right words. "I mean, I don't want to just rebuild my business or my wealth," he said slowly. "I want to rebuild my life. I want to rebuild my relationships. And I want you to be a part of that." The words hung in the air between them, and Anna's heart raced. She had heard him, but she wasn't sure she understood. "You want me to be a part of your life?" she asked, her voice trembling. Grant nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "Yes," he said simply. "I want you in my life, Anna. Not as my nurse, but as someone I care about, someone who matters to me." Anna didn't know what to say. Her mind was racing, her emotions were overwhelming, and for a moment she felt completely unsure of what the future would hold. But then, as she looked into Grant's eyes, she realized that maybe, just maybe, they were both standing on the edge of something beautiful. Something they had both been waiting for. Something that had begun in the most unexpected of places. "I care about you too," she said softly, her voice steady now. "I just don't know where this will go." Grant reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "I don't know either," he said, "but I'm willing to find out. Together." In that moment, as they sat there, holding hands in the quiet hospital room, Anna felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever happened next, whatever the future held, they would face it together. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly hopeful about what was to come. As the days passed, the bond between Anna and Grant deepened, and the changes in both of them became more apparent. Grant was no longer the cold, distant man who had once dominated the world of business. Instead, he was learning to embrace vulnerability, to understand that life was about more than just wealth and power. Anna had been there every step of the way, and now, as he began to rebuild not only his body but also his life, she realized that she had become an integral part of his journey. Their connection had gone beyond the walls of the hospital room, and it was no longer just about recovery, it was about healing together. Grant had always been a man of control, but now he was learning to let go, to allow others to help him, to allow himself to depend on those he trusted. It was a slow process, and sometimes it felt like he was taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but Anna could see the determination in his eyes. Every day, he made small strides. He asked more questions about his past, about the people he had hurt, and how he could make amends. Anna shared what she knew, but she also allowed him the space to explore these questions on his own, to come to terms with the man he had been and the man he wanted to become. One evening, as Anna helped him with his physical therapy exercises, Grant spoke again. This time, his voice was full of emotion, a tone Anna had not heard before. "Anna," he began, his hands gripping the edges of the bed as he tried to sit up. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about the life I had, the mistakes I made, and I realized something." He paused, his gaze turning inward as if trying to find the right words. "I don't want to live in the past anymore. I don't want to be the man who only cared about what he could build or what he could own. I want to be the man who cares about the people in his life. I want to be the man who values love over ambition." Anna's heart swelled with emotion as she listened to him. This was the Grant she had been waiting for, the man she knew was still inside, the man who had lost himself in the pursuit of power but was now slowly finding his way back to what truly mattered. "Grant," she said softly, "you've already come so far. I've seen the way you've changed, the way you're learning to care for yourself and others. That's what matters. And that's what will help you rebuild your life, love and kindness." Grant looked at her, his expression filled with gratitude. "I don't know if I would have made it this far without you, Anna," he said quietly. "You've been the one constant in my life, the one person who never gave up on me. I don't think I can ever repay you for that." Anna's eyes softened, and she smiled gently. "You don't need to repay me, Grant," she replied. "You're doing it already. You're changing, you're becoming a better man, and that's all anyone could ask for." The next few weeks were filled with moments of growth, both for Grant and for Anna. Grant was slowly regaining his strength, but more importantly, he was learning to open up about his past and confront the mistakes he had made. He began to reach out to the people he had hurt, apologizing for his past actions, trying to make amends where he could. Anna was there, supporting him, guiding him through these difficult conversations, but she never pushed him. She allowed him the space to grow at his own pace, to find his own path to healing. But despite the progress they had made, there was still a lingering question hanging between them. As Grant became stronger, Anna couldn't help but wonder where this journey was taking them. She had been his caregiver, his constant support, but now she found herself questioning whether there was more between them than just a professional relationship. She had developed feelings for him, feelings that went beyond friendship, but she wasn't sure if Grant felt the same way. Their connection had grown deeper, but could it survive the transition from patient and caregiver to something more? One evening, as the sun set behind the hospital's windows, Grant turned to Anna with a look that sent a rush of warmth through her. "Anna," he said softly, "I know we've been through a lot together, and I know it's complicated, but I need to ask you something." His voice faltered for a moment, and Anna's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady but full of curiosity. Grant took a deep breath and looked her in the eyes. Would you be willing to give us a chance? To explore what we have outside of this hospital room? Anna's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she was speechless. She had never expected him to say something like that. Never imagined that Grant, the man who had been so distant and guarded, would open up to her like this. Grant, she whispered, I don't know what the future holds, but I would like to see where this goes. I care about you, and I believe in what we're building together. Grant smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. Then let's build it, he said softly. Let's see where this journey takes us, together. And in that moment, Anna realized that whatever came next, they were no longer just two people bound by circumstance, they were partners, ready to face the future side by side, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As the days passed, Anna and Grant's relationship evolved in a way neither of them had anticipated. What had begun as a professional connection, built on trust and care, was now blossoming into something more profound, something neither of them could deny. The bond they shared was no longer defined by Anna's role as Grant's nurse. It was becoming something deeper, something personal. They found themselves spending more time together outside of the hospital room, talking about everything from their childhood memories to their dreams for the future. Grant had come a long way since his recovery began. The man who once held tight to the reins of his empire was now learning to let go, not only of his past but of the need to control everything in his life. He had spent so many years chasing success, driven by the belief that wealth and power were the keys to happiness. But now, he was beginning to understand that true fulfillment didn't come from money. It came from connection, from love, from being present in the lives of those who mattered. And Anna was quickly becoming the most important person in his life. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of Grant's private room, Anna looked at him with a mixture of affection and uncertainty. They had come so far, but she couldn't ignore the questions that lingered in her mind. Where was this all leading? Was this just a passing connection forged in the pressure of the moment? Or was it something that could last? She had been through so much with him, seen him at his lowest and his most vulnerable. But now, as he began to heal, she was confronted with the reality of their situation. She was still his nurse, and he was still a patient in recovery. Grant seemed to sense her hesitation. He reached over and took her hand gently, his touch warm and comforting. Anna, he said softly, his voice steady, I know things aren't simple. I know this isn't how either of us imagined this going, but I need you to know something. What we have, it's real. It's not just about me getting better. It's about us, about what we've built together. Anna swallowed, her emotions rising as she listened to him. She had never expected Grant to open up like this, to speak so honestly about their connection. I know it's real, she whispered, but I also know it's complicated. You're recovering, and I'm still your nurse. It feels like there's a wall between us that I don't know how to cross. Grant's eyes softened, and he squeezed her hand. I know, he said, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to take that step, even if it's hard. You've been here for me through everything, and I can't imagine my life without you now. I want to see where this goes, Anna. Not just as a nurse and a patient, but as two people who care about each other. His words left Anna speechless. She had never expected him to say something so simple, yet so profound. She had spent so much time questioning their connection, wondering if it was just a product of the difficult circumstances they had found themselves in, but hearing him say those words made her realize that this was more than just a fleeting bond. This was something real, something worth fighting for. I want that too, Anna said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. But I don't want to rush things. I want to make sure we're both ready for whatever comes next. Grant nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm ready, he said softly. I'm ready to start this new chapter with you, whatever that looks like. And in that moment, Anna knew that this was just the beginning of something new. The journey they had started together was far from over, but now, it was no longer just about recovery, it was about the future they would build together. They both knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles to overcome, doubts to face, and challenges to navigate. But for the first time in a long time, Anna felt a sense of peace. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future held. But one thing was certain, she wasn't alone in this anymore. They would face it together, no matter what. As they sat together, their hands still intertwined, the world outside seemed distant, almost irrelevant. All that mattered was the quiet, shared understanding between them, the promise of a new beginning, and the hope that, despite everything they had been through, their story was just beginning. The future was uncertain, but with Grant by her side, Anna felt ready to embrace whatever came next. Months passed, and Grant's recovery continued to improve, both physically and emotionally. The man who had once been consumed by his wealth, success, and need for control was now learning to embrace a different version of himself, one that valued love, connection, and kindness above all else. And through it all, Anna remained by his side, not just as his caregiver, but as his partner, his confidant, and the person who had helped him rediscover what truly mattered in life. Together, they faced the challenges of rebuilding their lives, and as the days turned into weeks, they grew closer, their bond stronger than ever. They had both been through so much, but it seemed that all of it had brought them to this moment, the moment where they could finally be free of the past and look forward to a new beginning. One evening, after a particularly long day of therapy and reflection, Grant and Anna found themselves alone in his private room. The world outside silent and still. The soft hum of the machines and the gentle rustling of the sheets were the only sounds in the room. Grant looked at Anna, his expression soft, but his eyes filled with something deeper, something that had been growing inside him for months. "Anna," he began, his voice quiet but steady, "I've spent so much of my life focusing on the wrong things. I've hurt people, I've pushed people away, and I've lost sight of what really matters. But you've shown me what truly matters." He paused, his hand reaching for hers, the warmth of his touch a reminder of how far they had come. "You've helped me heal in ways I didn't even know were possible, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Anna's heart raced as she listened to him, her breath catching in her chest. She had never expected Grant to say something like that, especially after everything they had been through. She had always known he was capable of greatness, but hearing him admit that he was ready to embrace a new life, one that was grounded in love and connection, made her realize just how far he had come. "Grant," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I've always believed in you. I believed in you before you believed in yourself. I've been by your side because I knew you had more to offer the world than just your wealth and success." She squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and hope. "You've already become a different person, and that's all that matters." Grant smiled, the warmth of his expression melting Anna's heart. "I want you to know, Anna, that I'm ready for whatever comes next. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to face it with you by my side." Anna felt a tear slip down her cheek as she looked at him. She had spent so long wondering if their connection was real, if their bond could survive the trials they had faced. But now, with him here, so vulnerable and yet so strong, she knew the answer. They had been through the hardest of times, and they had made it through together. Whatever the future held, they would face it as partners, as equals, and as two people who had learned to love and trust each other in ways they had never thought possible. A few months later, Grant's health had stabilized enough for him to leave the hospital, but he and Anna knew their journey was far from over. They had spent so many months focusing on recovery, but now it was time to focus on the future. It wasn't just about Grant rebuilding his business or finding his place in the world again. It was about the life they would build together. They both knew it wouldn't be easy, and there would be challenges along the way, but they were ready. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. One evening, as they sat in a quiet cafe, sharing a meal and talking about their plans for the future, Grant turned to Anna, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Anna," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a future together, to be there for you the way you've been there for me. Will you marry me?" Anna's heart skipped a beat as she looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never expected this moment to come so soon, but deep down she knew it was the right time. She smiled through her tears, nodding slowly. "Yes, Grant. Yes, I will marry you." And just like that, everything they had been through, every struggle, every challenge, every moment of doubt had led them to this point. They were no longer just two people trying to heal from the past. They were a team, ready to face the future together, with love, trust, and a deep understanding of what truly mattered in life. As they held each other close, Anna knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. Whatever came next, they would face it hand in hand, ready for whatever the future held.